Ray Dekker called me at 34/7 on a Tuesday. January light through the office windows, weak and gray. 1 year to the day since Margot's funeral. Mr. Lindquist, we found something behind the wall. You need to see this yourself. I drove to Lindquist Tower in silence. Margot's office. Chanel No. 5 under the dust. Her leather chair still turned toward the window. Ray stood by the torn drywall, plaster dust on his shoulders, his flashlight beam fixed on a steel vault door. A cream envelope was taped to the door. Her handwriting. Don't open it alone. Bring your sons. My hand holding the envelope went still. Before the story continues, tap subscribe and tell me what time it is where you are. Thank you for being part of this. I'm 62 years old, and I built half the skyline you see from any rooftop in Minneapolis. My father came over from Sweden in 1961 with $40 and a welder's certification. Lars Lindquist. He worked iron for 37 years, never missed a day, never complained. I used to watch him come home with burns on his forearms and metal shavings in his hair. He'd wash up at the kitchen sink, kiss my mother, and sit down to dinner like he'd spent the day at a desk. Honest work builds things that last forever, he told me once. We were walking past a bridge he'd helped construct. Long after you're gone, the work remains. Welding started at 18. Days on job sites, nights at the community college. 7 years to earn my engineering degree. I'd fall asleep with textbooks open on my chest, wake up at 5 for the morning shift. My hands were calloused before I was 20, scarred before I was 25. I still have the burn mark on my left forearm from a torch that slipped in 1984. The skin there is smooth and white, shaped like a crescent moon. I met Margot during my final year of school. A contractor named Hendricks had been shorting my materials orders and billing me full price. I hired an outside auditor to check his books. She walked into my office trailer in a gray suit with a leather briefcase, looked at me like I was another problem to solve, and said, "Your contractor's been stealing from you for 6 months. Here's how." She found the fraud in 3 days. I found my wife in the same 3 days. We married 8 months later. Small ceremony. Her parents thought she was settling. My parents thought I was reaching. They were both wrong. I founded Lindquist Steel and Construction when I was 32. $12,000 in savings, a truck with 180,000 miles, and Margot. She quit her auditing job to handle the books. I handled the builds. For the first 5 years, we worked out of our apartment. I drew blueprints at the kitchen table while she ran numbers on the couch. We ate dinner at 11 o'clock most nights. 147 commercial structures. That's what we built over 4 decades. Office towers, parking garages, hospital wings, shopping centers. I walked every job site, knew every foreman's name. There was a summer in 1992 when I spent 14 hours a day on a hospital expansion in Rochester. Margot drove down every Friday with sandwiches and spreadsheets. We'd eat in my truck, reviewing budgets while the sun went down behind the construction cranes. In 1985, we built Lindquist Tower. 12 stories of steel and glass in downtown Minneapolis. Our headquarters. I designed every floor, chose every material, walked every beam before the concrete set. Ray Dekker joined me 4 years later, a 23-year-old kid who didn't know the difference between rebar and reinforcement mesh. I trained him myself. He became my best foreman. Margot had one request during the tower's design phase. "I want a vault in my office," she said, "built into the wall. Something secure." "For what?" "Important documents." I added it to the blueprints myself. Custom steel door, combination lock, fireproof interior. I thought she meant wills, insurance policies, maybe the deed to our house. I didn't ask more questions. Margot always had reasons, and they were always good ones. We bought the Lake Minnetonka house in 1988. 4 bedrooms, 3 acres, a dock where I taught the boys to fish. Derek was 6. Cole was 3. We raised them in that house, tried to give them what my father gave me: work ethic, integrity. The understanding that nothing worth having comes without sacrifice. Derek commanded attention from the start. Quarterback in high school, fraternity president at Northwestern, MBA from Kellogg. Rooms rearranged themselves when he walked in. Cole was quieter. Math came easy to him. So did following instructions. So did disappearing when Derek took center stage. He became a CPA, joined the company as CFO when Derek took over operations. 5 years ago, I retired. 57 years old, 25 years of building, and I was tired. Margot wanted to travel, see the places we'd always talked about. I called a meeting with both boys, handed them the keys, and said the words I'd been rehearsing for months. "It's yours now. I trust you." No oversight committee. No retained board seat. No transition period with me looking over their shoulders. My father never questioned my integrity, and I wouldn't question theirs. Family loyalty transcends corporate governance. That's what I believed. 18 months ago, Margot was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The doctor gave us 6 months, and she took every one of them, fighting with the same precision she'd brought to every audit, every financial statement, every problem she'd ever solved. I stopped going to the office, stopped returning calls, stopped caring about quarterly reports or contractor bids or any of the 1,000 details that had consumed my life for 4 decades. I sat with her through chemotherapy sessions, held her hand during radiation treatments, read to her when she was too weak to hold a book. She died on a Tuesday in January. Snow on the ground, gray light through the hospice window. I held her hand until it went cold. The year after her death passed in fragments. I visited her grave every week, rain or snow or sun. Drove past my buildings at night. Sat in my truck until dawn. The Lindquist Tower at 2 a.m., the federal courthouse annex at midnight, the parking structure on 5th Street as the sky turned pink. Her buildings too, really. Everything we built together. I barely noticed when the boys stopped inviting me to board meetings. Derek said the company was in good hands. Cole nodded along. I believed them because I needed to believe something, and grief had hollowed out everything else. The first time I noticed the change in how they spoke to me, I was standing in the Lindquist Tower lobby. I'd stopped by unannounced to drop off some of Margot's old files. The receptionist looked startled. The office manager asked if I had an appointment. Derek met me in the elevator. "Dad, you should have called ahead. We could have set something up." His voice was patient, careful, the tone reserved for the elderly and confused. I mentioned the quarterly reports I hadn't seen. Derek laughed. "Dad, you've been out of the game too long. Let the professionals handle it." Cole was in the hallway when the elevator opened. He wouldn't meet my eyes. That night, I sat in my truck outside the tower until 3 a.m., the building I designed, the company I founded, the legacy I'd handed over, without a single safeguard. My boys spoke to me like I was a relic, something to be managed. I drove home in silence, past the cemetery where Margot lay, past the buildings that bore my name, past the life I thought I understood. 3 weeks before Margot's final chemotherapy session, I sat in the oncology ward alone. Derek had an investor meeting in Chicago. The chair beside me stayed empty. I watched poison drip into her veins. She asked where our son was. "Working," I said. She nodded. Didn't say anything else. But I saw her hand tighten on the armrest. He missed the next session too. And the one after that. Cole came to one, sat in the corner scrolling through his phone, and left after 40 minutes because he had a conference call. The nurse, Patricia, stopped asking about the boys. At Margot's funeral, I stood at the podium and spoke about the woman I'd loved for 38 years. Her precision, her humor, the way she could find fraud in a spreadsheet, the way other people find typos in a letter. I talked about our wedding day, our first company truck, the way she'd always find my mistakes before anyone else. Derek's phone lit up twice during my eulogy. He checked it both times. Cole stood at the church's back wall, arms crossed, eyes on the floor. When I finished speaking, neither of them looked up. Sunday mornings at her grave, driving past our buildings at night, letting the phone ring. The boys called occasionally, short conversations about nothing, their voices careful and distant. I assumed they were grieving too. I assumed we were all broken in our own ways. I was wrong about what was breaking. 3 months after the funeral, I stopped by Lindquist Tower unannounced. The lobby was quieter. The security guard, Marcus, looked up from his phone when I walked in. 15 years, and I'd never seen him startled by my presence. "Mr. Lindquist, nobody told me you were coming." Nobody knew. I took the elevator to the 8th floor. Margot's office was locked, which I expected. What I didn't expect was the conversation that died when I stepped into the hallway. 4 employees stood near the coffee machine. Their conversation stopped mid-sentence when I rounded the corner. "Good morning," I said. They nodded, scattered, found reasons to be elsewhere. I found Derek in his corner office, the one that used to be mine. He was on the phone, feet on the desk, laughing at something. When he saw me through the glass wall, the laugh faded. He ended the call without saying goodbye. "Dad, you should have called ahead. I was in the neighborhood." He stood, buttoning his jacket. The jacket was new. Italian cut, $3,000 minimum. His watch caught the light. Gold Rolex, not the Submariner I'd given him for his 30th birthday. Something bigger, showier. "Everything okay?" he asked. I wanted to see the quarterly reports. "I haven't received them." Derek smiled, the patient smile reserved for children and the elderly. "We moved to a digital system. I'll have Cole send you the login." The login never came. I asked twice more. Cole promised each time. Nothing arrived. When I pressed, Derek told me the reports were being prepared, being reviewed, being finalized. The words changed. The result didn't. Board meetings shifted from quarterly to as needed. I stopped receiving agendas. When I asked Derek about it, he put his hand on my shoulder. "Dad, you retired, remember? You wanted to step back. Let us handle the business." I wanted to see the company continue. I didn't want to be cut out. "You're not cut out. You're retired. There's a difference." His hand stayed on my shoulder a beat too long. The way you touch someone frail, someone to be managed. 6 months after Margot's death, I drove past Derek's new house in Wayzata. $2.8 million. 8,000 square feet. 4-car garage. A boat dock on Lake Minnetonka. I'd checked the listing 3 times, hoping I'd misread. I'd sold him the company. I hadn't sold him this. The Porsche appeared a month later. Black. Vanity plates that read Deal Lawn. Then the Rolex, which I saw up close when he came to dinner at my house and spent the evening checking his phone. $45,000 on his wrist. I knew because I'd priced it after he left, sitting in my truck in the driveway, wondering where the money came from. I asked Cole about our current bonding capacity at that dinner. Simple question. CFO should know it cold. His fork stopped halfway to his mouth. I'd have to check the exact numbers. Round figures are fine. Derek cut in before Cole could answer. Dad, you've been out of the game too long. Let the professionals handle it. He laughed when he said it. Not a cruel laugh, exactly. Worse, a dismissive one. The laugh you give when someone asks a question that doesn't matter. Cole stared at his plate. He'd lost weight since the funeral. His collar hung loose. His hands trembled when he reached for his water glass. When I said the word finances, he flinched. After they left, I sat in my living room and looked at the photographs on the mantel. Margot and me at the Lindquist Tower, groundbreaking. The boys at 8 and 5, holding hard hats too big for their heads. Our 30th anniversary, her hand on my chest. Both of us laughing at something I couldn't remember anymore. I should have asked harder questions. I should have demanded answers instead of accepting excuses. But grief had made me soft, and I wanted to believe my sons were still the boys I'd raised. I kept my questions to myself until Ray Dekker called that winter. He was starting his own crew. Had to, he said. The company had restructured. Restructured how? He paused. They're bringing in new people. Younger, the old guard is getting pushed out. Who authorized that? Derek said we needed to modernize. Fresh blood. New approaches. Another pause. I'm sorry, Mr. Lindquist. I don't think he knows what he's doing. I thanked Ray and hung up. The one-year memorial came on a Tuesday in February. I'd arranged a simple gathering at Lakewood Cemetery. Flowers, a prayer, a few words about Margot. Nothing elaborate, just family and the pastor. Derek arrived 20 minutes late. His car pulled up as the pastor began the opening prayer. He walked across the frozen grass to join us, phone already in his hand. Sorry, he said, not a whisper. Full voice. Traffic. The pastor continued. Derek's phone rang. He checked the screen, then answered it. I have to take this, he said, stepping away from the grave. Cole watched him go. I watched Cole. His jaw was tight. His eyes were wet, but he didn't say anything. Derek returned as the pastor finished. He stood beside me, hands in his coat pockets, bouncing on his heels like a man waiting for an elevator. Dad, I hate to do this, but I've got a critical closing in 30 minutes. I need to run. Your mother's memorial. I know, I'm sorry, but this deal could change everything for the company. He hugged me. A quick hug, the kind you give a colleague. Then he was walking back to his car, phone already at his ear. Cole stayed for another 10 minutes. He apologized for Derek 3 times. Each apology sounded more hollow than the last. When he left, I was alone with the pastor and Margot's headstone. The pastor offered to stay. I told him to go. I stood at her grave until my feet went numb. February wind cutting through my coat, gray sky pressing down. and I realized something I'd been refusing to see for a year. My sons hadn't asked a single question about their mother. Not about her illness, not about her death, not about the woman she was, or the life we'd lived. They'd come to her funeral and checked their phones. They'd come to her memorial and left early. Her company, her money, her husband's trust. They'd inherited everything except her integrity. 2 weeks after the memorial, I made a decision. Margot's office couldn't stay frozen forever. I'd avoided the 8th floor for 12 months. Walked past the elevator banks, took the stairs to other floors, found reasons to visit every corner of Lindquist Tower except the one that still smelled like her perfume. But grief has a shelf life, even the kind that hollows you out. At some point, you either move forward or you calcify. I called Ray Dekker that morning. "I need your crew," I said. "Margot's office. The bookcases need to come out." He didn't ask why I'd chosen him over the company's current contractors. We both knew. Derek had pushed Ray toward early retirement 8 months ago. Modernization, they called it. Fresh blood. What it meant was clearing out anyone who might remember how things used to be done. "When?" Ray asked. "Tomorrow." His crew arrived at 7. 4 men I'd worked with over the years, now running independent under Ray's name. They moved through Margot's office with quiet efficiency, people who understood what the space meant. Her leather chair stayed by the window. Her photographs stayed on the desk. We were removing the built-ins, not erasing her presence. The bookcases were custom. Margot had requested them during the 1985 design phase, floor-to-ceiling walnut with adjustable shelving. I'd incorporated them into the original blueprints myself. 3 units spanning the west wall, each one anchored to the studs behind. Ray's crew started with the first unit. Standard removal. The second came out clean. When they reached the third, Ray stopped. "Mr. Lindquist." I was standing by the window, watching traffic crawl down Hennepin Avenue. Something in his voice made me turn. "Come look at this." The third bookcase had been pulled away from the wall, revealing drywall that shouldn't have been there. The original construction used plaster over brick for this section. I knew because I'd specified it. But what I saw now was modern gypsum board, taped and mudded within the last few years. The texture didn't match. The color sat a shade lighter than 40-year-old paint. Someone had modified a 40-year-old wall and tried to make it blend. The compound crumbled under my thumbnail. No settling cracks, no dust in the seams. Recent work. Within the last 3 years, maybe less. "This isn't original," I said. Ray nodded. "I noticed the seam first. Then the screws. Phillips head, not flathead. We used flathead in '85. I stepped back and studied the wall. 12 feet wide, 8 feet high. Standard dimensions for an interior modification. But there was nothing standard about unauthorized construction in my building, in my wife's office, using materials that didn't match my specifications. "Open it," I said. Ray's crew worked with controlled pressure. Pry bars at the edges, minimal damage. The drywall came away in sections, revealing the space behind. Steel, brushed and gleaming under the work lights. A vault door I'd designed myself 4 decades ago. I traced the brushed steel, found the manufacturer's stamp I'd specified in '84, the 3-bolt locking mechanism from the Sargent and Greenleaf catalog. Margot had asked for secure storage. I'd given her the best I could build. Then I'd forgotten about it, filed it away with 1,000 other details from 1,000 other projects. Someone had hidden it. built a false wall to conceal what I'd created at my wife's request. Ray's crew stepped back without being asked. The room went quiet, except for the hum of the HVAC system and the distant sounds of traffic 14 stories below. A cream-colored envelope was taped to the center of the vault door. Heavy paper, the kind Margot preferred for formal correspondence. Her handwriting crossed the front in the elegant cursive she'd learned from nuns at St. Catherine's. "Don't open it alone. Bring your sons." I stood there for a long time, 38 years of marriage. Every breakfast, every argument, every night in the same bed. And she'd kept this from me. A vault behind a wall, instructions I was only meant to find after she was gone. Whatever was inside that steel door, she'd decided I shouldn't see it while she was alive. Ray cleared his throat. "Need anything? Take your crew to lunch. An hour minimum." He didn't argue. When they were gone, I touched the envelope again. Read her handwriting. The loops and curves I'd seen on grocery lists, birthday cards, love notes left on my pillow when I worked late. The same hand that had written our sons' names on their birth certificate. I pulled out my phone and called Derek. "Dad, I'm in the middle of something important. Come to your mother's office. Now." Silence on the line. 3 seconds. 5. "Is everything okay? Bring you a brother. 8th floor." I hung up before he could respond. For 15 months, I'd asked instead of told, suggested instead of demanded, accepted excuses and postponements, and the patient condescension of sons who decided their father was a relic to be managed. I stood straighter. My voice, when I spoke, came out different, harder. I stood facing the vault and waited. They arrived together 53 minutes later. Derek in a charcoal suit that cost more than Ray's monthly salary. Cole in his usual ill-fitting corporate camouflage, already pale, already sweating despite the February cold outside. They stopped in the doorway, saw the dismantled bookcases, saw the torn drywall, saw me standing before a steel door that hadn't existed in their understanding of this building. Derek's face went gray. His eyes moved to the exact spot where the vault sat, like a man who knew where to look. Recognition. Cole started trembling before he'd taken 3 steps into the room. Not recognition, terror. The reaction of someone who knew what was inside and feared it. "What is this?" Derek asked. He paused 3 seconds before speaking. The same pause he used in negotiations. I held up the envelope so they could see their mother's handwriting. "Your mother left instructions." The vault door swung open on oiled hinges. Silent, smooth, Margot had maintained it. 3 leather-bound binders sat on a steel shelf, spines facing out. Red tabs divided each one into sections. Beside them lay 2 envelopes. The first bore my name in Margot's handwriting. The second read for Anita Vasquez, "When Conrad calls." I reached for the letter addressed to me. The paper was heavy, cream-colored, the kind she used for correspondence that mattered. My fingers left marks on the envelope's surface. Behind me, Derek shifted his weight. "Dad, whatever this is, quiet." I broke the seal. Inside, 3 pages of her elegant cursive. I unfolded them and began reading aloud. "Conrad, if you're reading this, I'm gone and the boys have finally done something that made someone open this vault. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive." My voice held steady. I pressed my thumb against the paper's edge until it bit into skin. I kept reading. "You would have confronted them. They would have lied. You would have believed them because you're their father and because I raised them too, and you'd never accept that we could have failed so completely. You needed to see for yourself. You needed proof you couldn't explain away. Cole's breath caught. A strangled noise escaped him. I didn't look at him. I discovered the fraud 2 years before my diagnosis. Cole's signature on a wire transfer that didn't match our operating procedure. I thought it was a mistake at first. Then I started looking. Really looking. The way I looked at Hendrix's books when you and I first met. I paused, swallowed, continued. What I found took me 6 months to verify and another 6 to document. By then, I was sick. Stage 4. The doctors gave me time, not much, and I had to decide what to do with it. Confront the boys and watch you defend them. Watch them lie to your face while I died knowing you'd never believe me over them? Derek stepped forward. This is, I said quiet. He stopped. I chose a different path. I spent my last 18 months building a case. Every transaction. Every forged signature, every shell company. I built it the way you taught me to build, with materials that can bear weight, specifications that don't lie, foundations that hold. I reached the end of the first page, turned to the second. The binders contain everything. Wire transfers totaling $4.7 million moved through shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands. Financial statements falsified to hide operating losses. Contractor invoices inflated by 40% with forged signatures. A timeline connecting each theft to Derek's private equity investments. I looked up. Derek's face had gone the color of old concrete. Cole's jaw trembled. His teeth clicked together. The August 15th transfer is the worst. $2.3 million laundered through a development fund as investor capital. I've annotated it with the relevant statute. 18 U.S.C. Section 1343, Federal Wire Fraud. 20-year maximum sentence. I set down the letter and opened the first binder. Red leather, soft under my fingers. Gold embossing. Margot's initials in the corner. I turned to the first tab. Wire transfer records. 47 of them. Amounts ranging from $50,000 to nearly $500,000. Each one annotated in her handwriting. Destination accounts in Georgetown, Grand Cayman. Routing numbers I didn't recognize. Dates spanning 3 years. The second binder held financial statements, quarterly reports I'd never received. Revenue projections that didn't match the wire transfers. And signatures. Cole's signature on every document, his careful accountant's hand approving numbers that couldn't have been real. I turned pages, found invoices from contractors I'd never heard of. Martin Brothers Construction, Lakeshore Development, LLC, Northwind Building Services. The signatures at the bottom were supposed to be mine. They weren't. Close, but not quite right. The stroke pattern was off. The pressure too light. Who forged these? I asked. No one answered. I opened the third binder. A timeline. Margot had mapped every transaction to a specific event. January 2022, Derek's investment in Apex Ventures. $400,000 transferred through Martin Brothers. February 2022, Apex Ventures reports 60% loss. March 2020, $600,000 transferred through Lakeshore Development. The pattern continued for 3 years. Investment, loss, theft. Investment, loss, theft. 3 years of the same cycle. The August entry took up an entire page. Derek's position in a tech startup called Data Sync. 2.3 million committed. The company folded 6 weeks later. Every dollar gone. I found the final section. Margot had titled it, "What They Don't Know I Knew." Derek ordered modifications to this office 18 months ago. He told the contractor it was for storage access. The real purpose was concealing the vault. Building Inspector Luis Mendoza certified the work without inspection. I have copies of the payment, $12,000 cash, delivered by Derek personally. I closed the binder, set it on Margot's desk beside the others. Derek spoke before I could stop him. "Dad, you don't understand the market pressures we were facing. The construction sector contracted 30% in 3 years. We had to adapt, find new revenue streams. The investments were calculated risks that didn't." I raised my hand. Palm out. The way I used to stop arguments on job sites. Derek's mouth closed. "The company," I said. "What's the current position?" Neither answered. "Tell me." Derek spoke through clenched teeth. "We have 72 hours before the operating loans come due. The banks are calling everything. If we can't make the payments, default. Restructuring. We could negotiate. You leveraged my equipment, my receivables, my buildings. Dad, 40 years. 147 structures. Every foreman's name. Every specification. Every beam I walked before the concrete set." I picked up the second envelope. Anita Vasquez. Margot's handwriting. A phone number written beneath the name. "Your mother built this case while she was dying, while you missed her chemotherapy sessions or investor meetings, while you checked your phones at her funeral. She sat in that chair by the window, cancer eating through her organs, and she documented every dollar you stole." Cole was crying now, silent tears running down his face. Derek stood rigid, a man who'd run out of angles. "She knew I'd believe you over her. She knew I'd make excuses, find explanations, convince myself there was some mistake. So she waited, built her case, left it here for me to find when I was ready to see the truth." I looked at the binders spread across her desk, the tabs, the annotations in her careful hand. Everything she was documented in evidence. 3 months ago, I would have believed them. I would have listened to Derek's explanations about market pressures and calculated risks. I would have accepted Cole's tears as proof of good intentions gone wrong. I would have found reasons to doubt my own wife's documentation because doubting my son's was harder. Margot knew that. She knew me better than I knew myself. "The money's gone," I said. "The investments failed. The company is 72 hours from collapse." Derek started to speak. I raised my hand again. "I'm not finished." I picked up the envelope with Anita Vasquez's name, turned it over in my hands. "Your mother left me instructions. A contact, someone who's been waiting for my call." I looked at each of my sons in turn. Derek, jaw tight, eyes moving. Cole, shoulders hunched, hands pressed flat against his thighs to stop the trembling. The boys I'd raised in the Lake Minnetonka house, taught to fish from the dock, handed the keys to my life's work. "I'll make the call." The number connected on the second ring. "Mr. Lindquist," a woman's voice, clipped and businesslike. "I've been waiting over a year for this call." I stood at my kitchen window, watching snow fall on Lake Minnetonka. The envelope with Anita Vasquez's name sat on the counter beside me. My hands were cold despite the heat running. My breath left no fog on the glass. You knew my wife. 40 years. She trained me when nobody else would hire a Latina accountant. When her letter arrived, I cleared my schedule. What did she tell you to do? Help you dismantle your son's fraud operation. Her words, not mine. I closed my eyes. Even from the grave, Margot's precision cut through everything. I have the binders, I said. The evidence. I have copies. Safety deposit box at Wells Fargo, downtown. Your wife was thorough. She always was. A pause. Wind rattled the windows. Outside, the dock where I'd taught the boys to fish lay buried under ice. I can be at your house in 90 minutes, Anita said. We should review everything before you decide what to do. I already know what I'm going to do. Good. Then we should discuss how. She arrived at 4:15. Gray Volvo, practical winter tires, no wasted motion as she walked from the driveway to my front door. I watched her through the window. Salt and pepper hair cropped close. Rectangular glasses. A charcoal suit that meant business. Her footsteps crunched on the frozen walkway. The brooch caught the porch light as she reached for the doorbell. Silver, shaped like an abacus. Small enough to miss if you weren't looking. I opened the door before she could ring. Margot gave that to you, I said, nodding at the pin. Anita touched it. Her voice softened. 1986, she said. Every good accountant should remember where numbers come from. I stepped aside to let her in. Her eyes moved from the photographs on the mantel to the furniture to the exits. 3 seconds. She'd mapped the room. Then her gaze settled on the wedding photo, her hand drifting back to the brooch. She loved this house, Anita said. We built it together. I know, she told me about the dock, the summers with your sons, everything you tried to give them. I led her to the dining room table. The binders from the vault sat stacked at one end. I'd added my own notes overnight, cross-referencing Margot's timeline with the company's public filings. Anita set down her briefcase and opened it. Inside, identical binders with the same red tabs. She'd carried her own copies. Let's compare, she said. We worked through every document. Wire transfers matched. Forged signatures matched. Shell company registrations matched. Margot had built redundancy into her system, storing copies with Anita that mirrored everything in the vault. Anita turned to a flagged section. The August 15th transfer. This is the linchpin. $2.3 million through a development fund as investor capital. Your wife annotated the statute. I looked at Margot's handwriting in the margin. 18 U.S. SC Section 1343. Wire fraud. She'd underlined it twice. Federal prosecutors would use this as the centerpiece, Anita continued. It's clean, documented. The trail leads straight to Derek's signature. And Cole, CFO responsibility for every falsified statement. He signed the quarterly reports. He approved the transfers. Cooperation might reduce his exposure, but he's not walking away clean. I turned the page. A photograph of Derek's Wayzata mansion, printed from a real estate listing. Margot had written the purchase date and price, $2.8 million, 14 months ago. Your wife built a case that would make federal prosecutors weep with joy, Anita said. Every element, every timeline, every statute, she did their work for them. I closed the binder. Outside, the snow had stopped. Gray light pressed against the windows. The company has 72 hours before the banks call the loans. Anita checked her watch. 68 now. If you act before default becomes public, you control the narrative. Emergency board meeting. Federal referral. Restructuring announcement. The company survives. The employees keep their jobs. And my sons? Anita removed her glasses. Her eyes were dark and steady. That's not my decision, Mr. Lindquist. It's yours. She placed 2 documents on the table. One was a draft press release announcing executive misconduct and federal cooperation. The other was a letter to the board requesting an emergency session. Option 1. You present the evidence, refer the matter to federal authorities, and save the company. 200 employees keep their livelihoods. 40 years of your work continues. Your sons face consequences. I waited. Option 2. You do nothing. The banks foreclose. The company liquidates. Your sons face consequences anyway, but slower, messier. And 200 families lose their income because you couldn't pull the trigger. There's no option 3. There never was. Your wife knew that. That's why she built the case, instead of confronting them herself. I picked up the press release. Read through it twice. My name at the bottom as founder and majority shareholder, a title I'd surrendered 5 years ago and now reclaimed. I need to call Helen. Anita nodded. Derek's wife. She suspected. I could see it at family dinners. The way she watched him when he talked about money. Corporate lawyer before she quit to raise the children. She'll understand what you're showing her. I pulled out my phone. Helen's number was still in my contacts from years of family gatherings, birthday parties, holidays where Derek checked his phone and Helen pretended not to notice. She answered on the 4th ring. Conrad, is everything okay? Helen, I need to see you tonight. Alone. It's about Derek. Silence. 3 seconds. 5. I'll come to you, she. The children are with my mother. She arrived at 7. Thinner than I remembered. Tired around the eyes. She sat at my dining table as I spread the documents before her. Bank statements. Wire transfers. The timeline of purchases. She studied them for a long moment. Set them down. Picked them up again. Set them down. I knew something was wrong, she said. The lifestyle didn't match what he told me about the company. I slid the timeline across the table. Purchases that coincided with the largest wire transfers. The Wayzata house. The Porsche. The Rolex. Stolen, I said. All of it. Helen pulled out her phone, opened her calendar, started canceling appointments. My children, she said, I'll protect them. Their inheritance from the legitimate portions of your assets. College funds. Everything that wasn't bought with fraud. She met my eyes. The exhaustion was still there, but something else now. The corporate lawyer who'd prosecuted fraud cases before she'd traded courtrooms for carpool lanes. What do you need from me? Testimony. Documentation. Everything you've noticed over the years that seemed wrong. And in exchange, your children don't pay for their father's crimes. She picked up the timeline, studied it for a long moment, set it down. I'll testify. I called the board secretary at 9, invoking my authority as founder and majority shareholder. Emergency meeting, 8 a.m. tomorrow. Anita contacted the U.S. Attorney's Office through her professional channels at 9:30. Federal agents would attend the board meeting. At 11, I stood at my window watching the frozen lake. The dock where I'd taught my boys to fish. The house Margot and I had built together. Photographs on every wall of a family that no longer existed. My phone lay silent on the counter. No calls from Derek. No calls from Cole. They didn't know yet. In 12 hours, they would. Margot's letter sat beside the phone. Her handwriting, her instructions, her final gift. I picked it up and read the last paragraph again. The truth was never about revenge, Conrad. It was about restoration. Rebuild what they tried to destroy. That's what we do. That's what we've always done. I set the letter beside her photograph. Tomorrow, I would do exactly what she'd asked. The boardroom filled at 7:45. 8 people sat around the mahogany table. Banking partners from First National on the left. Remaining board members on the right. A laptop at the head of the table showed 3 faces on screen. 2 assistant U.S. attorneys I didn't recognize. The third square showed Agent Mitchell from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. I stood at the window, watching the Minneapolis skyline catch the morning light. Derek arrived at 7:58, 2 minutes before the meeting was scheduled to begin. Pressed suit, styled hair. The Rolex caught the fluorescent lights as he checked his phone one last time before entering. He stopped when he saw the faces around the table. "What is this?" I turned from the window. "Sit down, Derek." Cole was already seated, had been since 7:30. He hadn't spoken. His hands lay flat on the table, trembling. A leather briefcase sat at his feet. I hadn't asked about it. Derek looked at the laptop screen, at the federal officials staring back at him, at the banking partners with their folders already open. "Dad, whatever this is about," I said, "sit down." He sat. I walked to the head of the table and placed the first binder in front of James Morrison, our longest-serving board member. 73 years old. He'd known Margot for 30 years. "This is evidence compiled by my wife during the 18 months before her death," I said. "Wire transfers totaling $4.7 million. Falsified financial statements. Forged contractor signatures." Morrison opened the binder. His face changed as he read the first page. I passed the second binder to the banking partners. The third went to the laptop, where Anita held it up for the federal officials to see. Derek leaned forward. "These are internal documents that have been taken out of context. The market pressures we faced required creative solutions to." "The August 15th transfer," I said, $2.3 million. Laundered through a development fund registered to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. Returned as investor capital for a tech startup called DataSync. Derek stopped mid-sentence. DataSync folded 6 weeks after you invested. Every dollar gone. Your mother documented the routing numbers, the account holders, the timing that proves self-dealing. Morrison turned to a flagged section. His reading glasses caught the light as he leaned closer to the page. "This is Cole's signature," he said. "On every quarterly report." Cole made a sound. Not quite a word. His hands pressed harder against the table. "I have documentation," Cole said. The words came out thin. "Practiced. I kept records. Everything Derek told me to do, I wrote it down. Dates, instructions. I can prove I was following orders." He reached down and opened the briefcase at his feet. Inside, a thick folder of papers. His own evidence. Derek turned to his brother. "What did you say?" "I documented everything. The transfers you authorized. The statements you told me to sign. I have copies." The room went silent. On the laptop screen, Agent Mitchell wrote something on a notepad. Derek's voice dropped to a whisper. "You documented 3 years," Cole said. "Every instruction, every transfer. I knew this was coming. I knew it would fall apart eventually. Derek stood. His chair scraped against the floor. This meeting is over. I'm calling my attorney. The boardroom door opened. Two men in dark suits stepped inside, federal badges visible on their belts. Derek Lindquist, the first agent said. You're under arrest on federal wire fraud charges. They moved toward him with practiced efficiency. One agent produced handcuffs. The other began reading rights. Derek's Rolex flashed as his hands were pulled behind his back. $45,000 on his wrist, bought with stolen money, glinting under fluorescent lights as they led him from the room. Cole watched his brother leave. Then he turned to the federal officials on the screen. I'll cooperate fully, he said. Whatever you need. Agent Mitchell nodded. We'll be in touch within the hour, Mr. Lindquist. Your documentation will be reviewed. Cooperation will be noted in our sentencing recommendation. The screen went dark. I stood at the head of the table while the banking partners discussed emergency restructuring, deadline extension, operational control during transition, words that meant the company would survive. Morrison closed the binder and removed his glasses. Conrad, he said. I'm sorry. I nodded. There was nothing else to say. The weeks that followed moved with the precision Margot had engineered. Monday, Mendoza flipped. Tuesday, Helen filed. Wednesday, the Porsche was towed from Derek's driveway. Building Inspector Luis Mendoza flipped within 24 hours of federal contact, adding falsified permit charges to Derek's case. The modifications to the 8th floor. The bribe. The certification of work he'd never inspected. Mendoza wanted his pension more than he wanted Derek's silence. Helen filed for divorce on the 7th day. Her testimony, combined with Cole's documentation, filled 3 days of depositions. She sat in the witness chair with the same tired eyes I'd seen at family dinners, answering questions about purchases she'd never understood. The Wayzata mansion was not legitimate. Neither was the Porsche. Neither was the boat or the wine cellar or the home theater Derek had installed with company funds disguised as performance bonuses. Federal agents inventoried the house on a Tuesday morning. I drove past once, saw the trucks in the driveway, and kept driving. The house I'd questioned, the lifestyle that didn't match, all of it cataloged now as proceeds of crime. Cole's sentencing came first. 3 years in federal prison. His cooperation reduced his sentence significantly, but reduced still meant prison. His wife Ellen sat in the gallery crying without sound. When they led him away, he looked at me once. I held his gaze until the door closed. Derek's hearing lasted longer. His attorney argued market pressures, competitive necessity, the complex realities of modern construction finance. Judge Patricia Holmberg listened. Her face stayed neutral. No nods, no frowns, just watching. She'd known me for 20 years, had watched me build the federal courthouse annex from her chamber's window. She knew what honest work looked like. Mr. Lindquist, she said, addressing Derek, you had every advantage. Education, resources, a family legacy built on integrity. You chose to destroy it. She opened a folder on her bench. I recognized Margot's handwriting from where I sat. The evidence in this case was compiled by your mother during her final months of life. She wrote something in her summary that I believe deserves to be part of the record. The courtroom went silent. The hum of fluorescent lights, the scratch of the court reporter's keys, the smell of wood polish and old paper. The truth was never about revenge, Judge Holmberg read. It was about restoration. She closed the folder. 20 years maximum under federal sentencing guidelines. Given the scope of the fraud, the abuse of family trust, and the premeditated nature of the scheme, I'm imposing 15 years with eligibility for parole after serving 85% of the sentence. Derek's attorney began speaking. I stopped listening. 15 years. 85% meant roughly 12 years before parole eligibility. My eldest son would be in his mid-50s when he might walk free. Older than I was when I retired. Older than Margot was when she started documenting everything. I walked out of the courthouse into February sunlight, cold air, gray sky, the Minneapolis skyline spreading before me, buildings I'd constructed catching the winter light. The company survived. 200 employees kept their jobs. The legacy continued, rebuilt on the same foundation it had always stood on. Margot's foundation. I drove to Lakewood Cemetery and sat in my truck until the sun went down. Her headstone was covered in frost. I didn't get out, didn't need to. The frost on her headstone had started to melt. If you're still with me, hit like and tell me, how would you rate my revenge from 1 to 10 and why? 18 months after the trial, I stood at Margot's grave in spring light. The frost that had covered her headstone during my winter visits was gone. Grass pushed up around the marble edges, green and new. A cardinal landed on the oak tree behind the plot, sang 3 notes, flew away. I set the flowers down. White roses. Her favorite. The company survived, I said. No one answered. The cemetery was quiet except for wind through the trees and the distant hum of traffic on Lake Street. We restructured. New leadership, but I'm still there. Chairman Emeritus. Means I get a parking spot and an opinion. Whether they take it is up to them. I adjusted the roses so they sat straight against the stone. I brought Ray back, and the others Derek pushed out. Thompson, Sandoval, the whole crew from the Rochester job. They're running things the way we used to. Specifications that don't lie. A groundskeeper's truck passed on the service road. I waited until the engine noise faded. Cole got paroled last month. 2 years and 7 months served. He writes me letters now. Every week, same day, same handwriting. Says he's sorry. Says he understands if I never want to see him again. I touched the top of the headstone. I read them. Haven't answered yet. Maybe someday, not yet. Derek's name sat in my throat. I swallowed it down. His Kellogg MBA is collecting dust in a federal prison in Duluth. I don't know if that means anything to me. It means something to me. The cardinal came back, landed on the same branch, watched me with its black eye. I finally understand what you did, I said. You gave me the truth, but you gave me something else, too. Time. You knew I couldn't hear it while you were alive. You knew I'd defend them, explain it away, find reasons to believe their lies. So you waited, built your case, left it for me to find when I was ready. I looked at the Minneapolis skyline through the trees. My buildings, our buildings, still standing. You gave me blueprints, Margot. Not revenge. Blueprints to rebuild what they tried to destroy. I stood there until the sun moved behind a cloud, then emerged again. The stone warmed under my hand. Some foundations rot from within, invisible until catastrophic failure. You saw the rot. You left me the plans. I kissed my fingers and pressed them to her name. I rebuilt.